Hello and welcome back to Hindsight is 50/50. This is episode number 12. I'm the host J-Rod with my co-host, the ORG, old retired guy. Dad, how you doing?
Good. I'm an old retired guy looking forward to having everybody in the house for Thanksgiving. I always enjoy that when you guys and all the grandkids come out. Your mom enjoys it too. It's just nice to have everybody back, together. And it's nice that I know it's hard when you have young kids. It's an event to load everything up and take them somewhere. And you have a couple hour drive or at least an hour and a half, but it's nice that everybody wants to come home. I always feel like your guys' wives want to come out here too and look forward to it. And there'll be a lot of food to eat. I know that. And yeah, I'm just looking forward to Thanksgiving. I enjoy it when we all get together.
Oh, it's definitely a good time. A lot of bodies, though, a lot of chaos, and having all the kids become more and more mobile. It's quite the show. We've got 6 little ones between the 3 of us boys, and so having them all moving around and giggling and squealing, and then having to get them seats at the table and watch them make messes of their food.
It's a surprise, but I know your mom's told Joe and she may have told Melissa already, and it's not a surprise for you guys. It's a surprise for the kids.
Kiddie table?
We got them a kiddie table.
Nice. That'll be huge.
Yep. And 4 chairs right now, but you can buy more chairs, and the chairs are adjustable, so they can grow a little bit, which is good. And you can write on the table. Your mom bought markers, and you can draw on it.
I thought you said ride, and I was like, what?
No, you can write on it, and no, I think it'll be pretty cool. I think
That sounds good.
and they'll certainly like having their own place. But yeah, when you say we have 6 grandkids, we do. The oldest one is just a little over 3, and the youngest, who is now walking, will be 1. Well, he's not walking, but he's really close. He'll be 1 on the 31st of December, but he is literally walking along the edge of tables, etc., and moving a cardboard box around the floor while
doing
he's
the
walking.
Shuffle.
So we've got, everybody will be doing some form of walking, and I know Jameson's walking well, and Jackson's walking well, and then the other 3, they're running. So
yeah, and I mean, we have been, blessed so far with success. All of our marriages are still together, so that to me is another part of the chaos. Is you've got the 6 kids, but you also have 6 parents of those kids, and then you and mom as well. So it's a full house. I mean, what that's 14 people. It's like you are, and us boys are not small boys, so that is a lot of people on a little bit of furniture. But it's a pretty good time, and everybody brings a dish or a side or something.
Oh yeah. And I mean, I think we eat very well, and it's fun. And like I said, I enjoy it. I honestly, I think all the girls enjoy it too. It's work a little bit, to get ready, but it's good work. You're excited about it, from our end. We're excited about it because
is getting there not a problem. Getting the kids there not a problem. Side dishes not a problem. Everybody having a good time, piece of cake. Trying to get that family photo with 6 kids. Not so easy.
Well, yeah, but we've done it, and we'll do it again.
But that's
We'll do.
probably the hardest part. I would
Yeah,
honestly think, like, because everybody wants to be there. We want the kids to see each other. We all want to know each other. We want them to know their cousins. We want to get those family photos. Everybody wants to have the good food, and it's nice to come out to grandma and grandpa's house, as a family. So it's like that part is all so worth it that you don't think about the effort that's in it. But man, when you're trying to get those kids to look at the camera and then
oh,
each girl's gonna rotate and a one flash over here, one flash over
well, I
there,
think
and the
I
kids are like cheese, cucumber, peanut butter, I don't know.
well, I think in the pictures that you showed in the last podcast, or maybe it was 2 podcasts ago, but anyway, they were group pictures, they were family pictures. And in one of them, 2 of the kids had their fingers up their nose.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Another one, Max is showing his backside with his tail up. Yeah, so
so Melissa and I went to, it's funny you bring that up about pictures. So Melissa and I went to Cocomelon Live the other day
yeah,
with JJ.
yeah.
And it was pretty good. It was at the Fox Theater in Detroit, but I tell you what, man, those seats have not gotten any bigger. And that is, when you put me in one of those, that is 10 pounds of meat in a 5-pound sack. I mean,
I
it
love
is
the Fox
tight.
though. I
Um,
love the Fox Theater. I
Gorgeous
do.
theater, really good acoustics in there actually as well. And the
Absolutely.
elevators being the old school ones that are manual with the lever, it just
Yeah.
adds that extra experience because you kind of like miss the floor and got to readjust to come right back, and it's just all of it's cool and it's a neat retro experience and it was a fun time. And although it was a little cold outside when we were in line, the weather held out for the most part. But beforehand, we went to some restaurant. I couldn't tell you what it's called, but I told Melissa it kind of confused me because I couldn't tell if we were in a hip modern place or a retro place because it was lit up kind of like a modern bar, but also had the same vibe as like a diner from like Saved by the Bell. And so it was really wild, but it was a great place. It was kind of like a Shake Shack type place with their menu at least. But we go in there, and as we're eating this meal and hanging out and having a good time, Melissa wants me to get a picture, and it's like there's music playing, people are talking so loud. I mean, this place is louder than your average bar during even like a sports game. I mean, it is loud. Um, and so we're trying to keep JJ's attention. And I finally get him to look at the camera because Melissa wants me to take a picture. And he looks at me and smile. And I take a picture, and it was the only one out of all the attempts where we got him to smile and look at me. And Melissa's like looking at the ceiling. It's like, what are you doing? Like, come on. I didn't know I had to talk to you too. Hey, my eyes are here. And she goes, I looked at her and I was like, what are you doing? And she goes, oh, well, I don't know why, but you had the camera like kind of down low. And I was like, yeah, so I could get JJ's face in the picture. She goes, and I was looking you right in the eyes. So she's staring like 3 feet above the camera. It's just, what are you doing? But I
That's
just,
funny.
when you were talking about the pictures, I remember that it was a good time. But anyone who has kids that are little and they love Cocomelon, if you have an opportunity to go see Cocomelon live, one, I would recommend bringing earplugs. But two, it is very cool. It is one
Well, and
of
I
the
know he
least
loves it. I know
one of
that
the
JJ
least
loves it.
obnoxious things I've had to do for children because the people are up there on doing their little skit and songs. It's songs the whole time, so it's not like watching a play where there's dull parts in it. Um, but all the kids are happy. You fold the seats up where the kids are sitting at times so all the kids can dance, and it's a whole theater packed full of kids dancing to these songs, having fun, singing along, head, shoulders, knees, and toes, all that. But then just to watch all of the parents having a good time and then see how they structure it. So not only do you get into your seats and there's music the whole time, so there's not a dull moment, but then right in the middle they have like a 20 or 25-minute intermission, so all the kids can go for like diaper changes and everything else, and it just worked out perfectly. It was a very, very good time. So I would recommend taking them if you have little kids that are interested.
It looked like you guys had fun. Hey, based on the last on episode 11 when I told the beef jerky story, you had mentioned that there was a Joe cat kibble story.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that I'm sure I've probably heard it, but I'm not sure that I remember it. So
Yeah, you've definitely heard it, but you weren't there. So
okay.
So, and again, this is one of those stories that, will make me giggle to my core if I think about it long enough. And it may be funnier to me because I was there. But Joe, Jacob, and I growing up, we always had some sort of scheme going on. Two of us were picking on the other one, or Jacob was picking on both Joe and I. Somebody was trying to trick someone, prank someone, whatever the case may be. There was always something like deceitful going on in the background. So we're sitting there at the kitchen table at our old house, little kids. I might be 7 or 8 at the time, making Jacob 14, and we're talking. I think we had played Uno at the table, and then you guys fed us dinner. After we ate dinner, the three of us boys were sitting at the table drinking, and we all had a can of pop, and that was kind of like our treat for the night before we were going to go off and eventually go to bed. Joe had to go use the bathroom, so naturally Jacob is like, I dare you to put a cat kibble in this pop. And we don't even own cats. That's probably the best part of this story. There was a stray cat that came up to our house. And so mom decided to get those tiny little cat kibbles in a jar, like the soft chews.
Yeah.
I took one of those cat kibbles and I stuffed it down in his 7-Up can. And now we're sitting there, and Jacob and I are trying to hold it together as Joe comes back from the bathroom, and we start having a conversation. I think we maybe even started playing Uno again. And as we're sitting there talking, he and I just keep looking at each other, waiting and waiting and waiting for Joe to take a drink. And when I tell you the best possible outcome happened, I mean it. Instead of tasting it and being like, what the fuck? Joe decides to slam his pop. And the cat kibble gets lodged in his throat. And he chokes and spews everything he just drank all over the
Oh no.
And Jacob and I are sitting there crying. And right at the end, you just see one little cat kibble leak out of his mouth and start sliding down the table in the pop. And I mean, he's like, what the fuck, guys? And it was one of those classic moments where
And I bet
obviously you had to be there, but
no, that's funny. I bet Joe was not mad about that, was he?
no, I mean, he had that like initial like red blush of being frustrated he was the one got pranked, but it took about 4 seconds and he was laughing his ass off. I mean, pop was coming out his nose, out his mouth, and I kid you not, he spit out that pop from legitimately choking on that kibble so hard and so fast that after it calmed down, there was just a single cat kibble just floating across the table. Oh, it was so good. It was so good.
You just made me think of one that didn't happen to me, but I saw it happen. That was hilarious.
Okay.
You remember Brett Mackey played basketball with Jacob?
Yes.
Really good basketball player. I mean, a really good
He was the
basketball
first kid
player.
I saw dunk a basketball.
Yep. Yeah. Really good basketball player. Well, his mom and dad would always sit in the back of the bleachers. And we usually sat, up against the wall too at the basketball games. And we would, so we'd end up usually sitting pretty close to them. And they're very nice people, but they're real quiet. And one of his, I believe it was his dad's friends they seemed younger, like not old enough to have kids playing high school basketball, but there was a couple, a man and a woman. And I mean, this guy, it was like clockwork. He would get a bag of popcorn and he would just sit there, and it was like a machine, and it was one kernel at a time. And he would be watching the game, popping a piece of popcorn in his mouth, just repetition,
Like
like
throwing
without
it
even
back.
looking at the bag. And Brett Mackey's dad, and Steve, I think is his name, but anyway, nice guy, quiet guy. This couple is sitting right in front of him and his wife. And so as this guy is popping this popcorn, like, one after another, but he's watching the game. He's not doing anything. He's not focused on the bag. I mean, Mr. Mackey wadded up a couple of pieces of paper, like in the tiny sized paper balls, and like dropped them in the bag when the guy wasn't looking.
It's such a good innocent prank.
Oh, I know. And the guy got one, and he just like threw it away really quick.
Yeah, like
And then a little while later, he got another one. And then he turned around and looked at Mr. Mackey. And we're all like, the four of us are in the back row, just shaking laughing.
well, in the Mackeys, their whole family, when they're laughing, they are cherry red. I mean,
Oh,
like
yeah.
you can't hide it.
Yeah. 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 But
So was he getting your attention when he was doing it? Like he just wanted you to
no, but
see
you
that?
could see him, like he did it once. And it's like I saw him lean forward and I didn't know what he did. And he was grinning, and then I saw him wadding up another piece of paper. So then I knew what he was doing.
That's
And it
so
was, I mean, I just think that's a great, and it's a harmless thing. But again, the
Yeah.
guy, like, he bit into the first one and just kind of chucked it, like, down in the bleachers. And, like, bad piece of popcorn or something.
Yeah.
Certainly not like what I did with the jerky, but then he goes back to this repetitive, a kernel at a time eating while he's all into the game, man. He's absorbed in the basketball game, and he gets another one. And then that's when he
so
turned
good.
around and looked at him. And I
That's
mean,
so
by that
good.
time, we're all just like shaking. We're laughing so hard, trying to be quiet,
Oh,
or trying not to, because the game wasn't quiet, obviously, especially that was in the old Cracker Box gym that was so small. But
yeah, but you're trying not to get caught. I mean, that's
right.
the
And so there
worst
was
is like
noise, but there was no reason to be laughing your butt off. And
right.
the four of us were up there just cracking up while this guy's eating paper.
The
So
worst though is when something funny happens in church, in my opinion, because when you get giggling in church, there's nothing you can do. I
and
don't. There's something about it where, like, if I start giggling in church, I can't stop because I know I'm not supposed to be doing it.
that's the hardest part. I've had that happen to me at church, and your brother's Jacob's the absolute worst to be sitting next to when something like that happens, because he just like shakes and he's like, you could just,
Yeah.
he's breathing
Yeah.
hard and he's trying to suppress his laughter. And that, when you're trying not to laugh, that's worse. I had that happen to me at a wedding one time. And I mean, we were in the front row at this wedding. And the guys were all pranksters. I wasn't in the wedding, but I was there in attendance and I was sitting like right in the front. I must have been an usher or something, but I wasn't standing up in the group. And and it was a Catholic ceremony. So when they knelt, like one of the guys one of the groomsmen had written "Help me" on the groom's shoes. So he kneels down and both of his shoes you can see and it says "Help me." And that was you know, and the groomsmen were really having trouble, especially the guy who did it.
Oh,
And
for
I mean,
sure.
I'm sitting in the front and people are, I mean, it's funny, but man, that's a rough trick. That one, because that one can cause you some grief,
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That
You
one
gotta be
can
careful in
create
big
some
moments.
hard feelings, but yeah.
Well, just talking about moments like that where you can't hold it back, and I'm not trying to go too far down a different path here, but that was one of my favorite experiences when you and I both worked at Levy. So for those of you who don't know, my father and I both worked at the same company, and eventually we got to work together and on the same projects. And for about a year to a year and a half, we actually worked directly together. But we would get invited to these meetings, and it was, big, important meetings with sometimes powerful people in there. And someone would have a slip up or a faux pas or say something that just, it didn't sound good. And my favorite moments were when you and I, without saying a word, would look at each other and it's like, Jesus Christ, did he just say that? And it's like we're just like trying to hold it in, not laugh, and then other people see us and they start giggling. And those were just some of my most cherished memories there. That
Oh,
was a pretty good time.
I tell you, and I remember that. I do. I certainly remember that. And it's funny. It's not funny at the time because, well, it is funny at the time, but at the same time, you don't want to be disrespectful, you
You don't
know.
want to get in trouble either.
Well, I wasn't so worried about that, but I can understand you were new and I get that. But, before that happened with you and my friend Scott Carson, I mean, he's a vice president of the company. And
Yeah.
he would always most of the time people had their set spots in the conference room, you know. Like I would sit at one end, my boss would sit at the other end, and Scott most of the time would sit towards the other end. Now, as he got closer to retirement, because he retired before I did, he got to where he'd move down and sit closer to me because it would be so awkward when one of those things would happen. I'd look down at him and I'd know he got it. Like he picked up on what I picked up on. And I'd have to
Oh
like
yeah.
look at the clock or, because, that guy can make you laugh just by looking at you normally because he just has that look in his eyes,
And
that.
I was lucky enough to experience that in one of my first years there before he retired. I actually did get to go into a couple meetings with you guys, and that was priceless because of his expressions.
Oh, he would be the guy that I always said this because he's only a couple years older than me, but he would be the guy that if we were in class together, I wouldn't want to sit next to him in class
He
because
gets you in
man,
trouble all day.
I'd get in trouble all the time because I'd be laughing over one of his looks or, you know, and he would many times, like if somebody misused a word or something that or said a word that
Mm.
they clearly shouldn't have tried to use. Like they always say, don't use words you can't
It's
understand.
well outside their vocabulary for
Yeah. And
sure.
it's like you're experimenting, man. And in a group, you're really going
Mm.
out on the edge, especially in a group of people that a lot of them are highly educated, way more educated than I am, but also, like you said, some of them powerful people within the company.
Like
And
Stanford and
if somebody
Northwestern
misused a
educated.
word, he would 9 times out of 10, he'd try to use it the same way they did within minutes. And so then I'm really gripping, because somebody would say something that just didn't fit, or it was stupid, or it just didn't fit. And so sometimes there'd be an awkward pause, and then you just kind of move on. Well, Carson would notoriously try to reuse the word that they misused
This,
in the same way they misused it.
the smartest thing about that, though, and I didn't appreciate this at the time when he was doing it. It was only after his retirement that I realized him using it back not only was a joke to everyone that understood what was going on, but he was planting a seed for the future because that person was now going to think that it was correct and use it that way forever.
Well, and see, and I would
love
do
that.
the opposite. If they misused the word that I knew was misusing the word, as soon as I had an opportunity, I would try to use the correct word. And so hoping that they would pick up on it.
And there were
And
plenty of those, but then there was also the times where people said things that just sounded bad.
awful.
I don't have an example offhand, but I can think of something that would be in the neighborhood of it. I heard Charles Barkley talking one time, and we all know he has slip ups and mistakes, and he's on whatever sports broadcast channel he's on, and he's talking about when you're in the paint in basketball in a physical matchup and you guys are pushing back and forth and you're trying to score points. And he starts off by going, well, when you're banging a guy, and then just pauses for a second, and Shaq and Ernie and everyone else just loses it because he just left it hanging out there. And it's like those are the types of mistakes that would happen in a meeting where you say something out of context and it sounds so awful, but you're in front of higher ups where you got to hold it together, and that makes it 10 times funnier.
I totally agree with you. And it was, it's such a pleasure to work with him, with Scott Carson for a
Right.
number of years. At his retirement, I said, the only thing I regret about working with Scott is that I didn't get to work with him longer, because he's just a great guy. But the sense of humor was fantastic, and he was just a playful guy. That's how I look at you. And we've talked about Shaq. He's a playful guy. He just
Good-spirited human
is.
being.
He's a giant human being, but he is really a playful guy. He likes to have fun, and I really think Barkley does too. And I think Barkley is kind of self-deprecating, which I like. I enjoy that. Like
I
he'll
think he's smart enough to realize that's his shtick, and that's how
Yeah.
he stays
Yeah.
around.
I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. But I know we talked about a couple more things than we had planned.
Yeah,
So
that happens.
yeah, I know. And for people that don't like the length, I apologize for that, but I really don't apologize, because we're having fun, and I hope it's fun for listeners too. But I wanted to talk about the college football playoffs, because that show, they have the unveiling every Tuesday, and it's a big drama thing on ESPN. And I don't watch it. I mean, this week it's not going to change. It's Georgia, it's Ohio State, it's Michigan, and it's TCU. Well, all of those teams, all four of them, they're all unbeaten, but they all struggled this weekend. Georgia beat Kentucky 16-6, I believe. Kentucky's a tough out. Mark Stoops is a good coach. He's changed that program. I personally think it will forever be a basketball school, because basketball is going to always be king there. But they'll jump up and bite. People say, well, they lost to Vanderbilt. Yeah, they did. Well, Vanderbilt beat Florida last week too. And, Florida is not chopped liver. This year, they're a little bit down. They got a new coach and things. But so Georgia struggled. Ohio State struggled to put Maryland away, and didn't until right at the end. Michigan, I thought Michigan was going to lose that game.
So did
They were without Mike Morris. They played the whole game without Mike Morris and Luke Schoonmaker and Trevor Keegan, one of their starting
Edwards.
guards. Everybody gets injured. Well, and then Edwards, like you said, Edwards didn't play at all. Blake Corum gets hurt, plays 1 or 2 snaps in the second half. And we still don't know what his status is. But, and then TCU, Baylor had them that whole game. TCU won on the last play. They kicked a field goal and won by 1 point. And that's not TCU's first comeback win. All those teams remain unbeaten. But good teams find ways to win ugly games. And all 4 of those
100%.
teams did. This past weekend, they all did.
That's how I felt about the Michigan game was, you know, we didn't have all of those players you mentioned, and it almost seemed like we got to a point where we said, boy, I don't know that there's much we can do, but if we can just keep hanging on real close right here, we've got a good enough kicker that we'll get out of this one. And that's it. Almost seemed like we just managed the game and said we're just going to try and take points on every drive for our last 3 drives. I mean, what was it, like 6 minutes left in the fourth quarter, all the way down to 12 seconds? We ended up having 3 field goals.
Yeah,
It just seemed like we said, okay, no chunk plays, none of this. We're just gonna slow walk down the field, kick a field goal, slow walk down the field, kick a field goal, and we did it and controlled the end of the fourth quarter like that. But we didn't have not only our standout and flash player athletes, but it almost seemed like we just got to a point where it's like, okay, we can win this one off of just a little bit of grit instead of being the explosive team we want to be.
How could a couple things? How could Michigan and Ohio State not be peeking forward? They had to be. This is the game. This is, you know, and I know there's great rivalries all over the country, but for people in Michigan, Ohio, this is the rivalry. You know, this is it. And you know, for a long time, Ohio State just was beating us year after year after year. So it hadn't been a rivalry for quite some time because rivalries are supposed to be contested, and it wasn't. Well, last year Michigan jumped up and beat them, and this year I think, but again, we have to play. Michigan has to play their best game. If they play their best game and Ohio State plays their best game, I think it'll be a hell of a football game. I really do. But everybody gets hurt, especially this time of year. Illinois was without Fulks too. Regarding the Illinois-Michigan game, I think Bielema's a good coach. I have no idea how they lost 2 games in a row at home. I have no idea.
I feel like they were the perfect matchup with us because we play bully ball and they play bully ball, as to where if you don't have all of the athletes that, say, Michigan does on defense, you end up, and Illinois definitely has athletes, but you end up getting gashed by some of the flashier, more point-scoring teams, as to where they matched up very well to us. But I think the biggest difference, and I am very much about it being a team sport and everything else, but the biggest difference in this game was Michigan lost control when Corum got hurt. And Harbaugh even said this. They have a number 2. We have a number 2. Both of them were running backs. Well, their star running back controlled the game for them. Our star running back got hurt. And I think that's what put us in the hole. And that's when things started to get shaky and we had to rely on our kicker to get out. And thank God he made them all. But
Chase Brown's really good.
If you flop those two, if you play Corum that whole game and you have the Illinois running back get injured, I don't think it's a contest.
Well, yeah, and we'll never know, but Chase Brown is really good, and his brother plays defense. I think he's a linebacker. He's really good too. And I tell you what, they got a corner named Witherspoon.
Who hits like a freight train.
He's gonna play in the league. That kid is going to be, if he doesn't get hurt the rest of the way out, and I think he's draft eligible. Don't know off the top of my head, but I think he is. That kid at the combine, he's going to blow it up. He's going to be he's going to be one of the top 4 or 5 corners.
Well, he not only is one of the best cover corners, but he hits like a hard-hitting safety. I mean, that kid was blowing people up that game.
But just getting back real quick to the playoff thing, it's like there's all these scenarios out there. You know, USC from the Pac-12 is in. They have one loss. Right now they're ranked. They're fifth, I believe.
That was a tight game between them and UCLA.
It was, but they have to play Notre Dame, who's played better. Notre Dame's, I think, 8-3. And they lost to Marshall, and that was ugly. And they lost a couple games, their first two games. But Notre Dame's played a lot better. So that's not a walkover. And then USC has the Pac-12 title game, which, I don't know who's going to play in that yet because I don't think anybody knows. But USC has one loss, so they're behind those top four. TCU is fourth. They have Iowa State at Iowa State, which we all know. I mean, Matt Campbell was, a lot of pro teams were after him, maybe still are, from Iowa State. The Lions tried to hire him before they hired Dan Campbell, and he stayed at Iowa State. But that's no cakewalk. TCU has had comeback wins all year, but then they've got the Big 12 title game, which you don't know who's going to play on the other side, but right now it looks like Kansas State. Well, they were down 18 against Kansas State early in the year, and they came back and won. TCU did. So you got TCU that Southern Cal's got a tough road. TCU's got a tough road. Michigan and Ohio State have to play each other. Georgia, they'll have to play LSU in the SEC title game. Now, if LSU were to beat them, which they could, I mean, LSU's played better. I fear Georgia because I think that's one of those teams that if they focus and keep their foot on the gas, I think they're the best team in the country. So, you get into all these different scenarios. Clemson's sitting there in the ACC with one loss. They play North Carolina in the ACC title game. Well, North Carolina's got two losses. They just lost to Georgia Tech last week. But North Carolina scores points, and Clemson sometimes has trouble. The problem is North Carolina usually has trouble stopping anybody from scoring points. But
Right.
so there's, you have said for weeks, and I agree with you, there's a lot of football to be played. There still is. Everybody's talking about, could the loser of Michigan, Ohio State get in? Yes, they could.
Well,
There's
that's what I'm
ways.
saying. What happens if LSU beats Georgia? Georgia's the best team in the nation. They got to go. But then
I
that
think
means that
you're right.
LSU has to go because they beat them, right? But
Well,
then
they got two
Michigan
losses.
that's it. But they did beat the best team in the nation. Don't they deserve the playoff? But then you
buddy,
have Michigan running into Ohio State, so one of them has one loss, and you have these other teams who might be undefeated or one loss, and it's like, okay, you might potentially at the end of the season, granted LSU has two losses, but at the end of the season, you might have the four best teams in the country, two of them playing against each other in each conference. And are you really not going to bring the other two to the playoff because they got fucked by a schedule?
I don't know.
Conference
I don't know.
championship?
But like you've said, there's a lot of football to be played. There's a lot of it going to be figured out in this coming weekend, and then in the following weekend of the conference championship games. And I really do believe it'll all shake out and it'll end up how it should be. Most of the time, when they've gone to this 4-team format, a team will think they got screwed. UCF did a few years ago. They're not in a Power 5 conference. So I don't care if you went undefeated. That's great. Congratulations. But, they're not in a Power 5. So I just don't think that, or they weren't then anyway in a Power 5. I think it'll all shake out, and I think it'll end up being the way it's supposed to be. I really do.
My only fear, and again, this is biased from the Big Ten, it is that championship, and I've heard from both sides this year that neither team is looking forward to this game, and it's not the excitement or anything. All of that's there. It's that both of us haven't played our best games. Michigan and Ohio State both have not played their best games in recent weeks, but we understand how dangerous one another are. The worst part is this rivalry is so big and it's so important, but you almost get punished by it because the loser is almost guaranteed to not make the college football playoff.
Well-
And that is my fear that we've seen it before where one-loss SEC teams make it in, but because Michigan and Ohio State are the two best teams in their conference and they play at the end of the season, they get punished by that schedule. And it's kind of difficult when you rank strength of schedule to try and get whoever the fourth team is to make it into the playoff, because when you look at the SEC, they have more dominant teams. So, you're sharpening each other, right? As to
Right.
where in the Big Ten, you've got a couple dominant teams, but the rest are kind of easy. So the conference isn't sharpening itself to make itself better. You're either getting your shit tossed or playing another shitty team. So
I just think,
you almost lose out on that by playing the Michigan Ohio State game at the end of the season.
well, yeah, and you're that's a fair point. I just think that by the time it's all over, it'll all shake out. It really will. I don't think that well, of the four right now, all four of them aren't going to be undefeated because two of them play each other.
Right.
So that's going to change. But that doesn't mean those four won't be in there at the end of the year. That doesn't mean that. It's too early to say that. TCU's got a tough road. Clemson's got the easiest road, but they've got one loss and they play in the weaker league. And I'm sorry, but the ACC is a weaker league right now. Clemson's a good team, but USC's got one loss already. And it's
I just wonder if they could solve this by having a crossover game. Whoever the number one team in the nation is gets a bye straight to the playoff, right? And then the other four power conferences have their best teams play against each other so that we can fill the rest of the slots. So then we've got three right there, and then the fourth one will be the best team with two losses.
They're going to solve it because they're going to go to an eight-team playoff, and that'll fix it.
Which would be huge because you're going to represent each of the conferences much better. I do think that'll be a better format.
It should. I mean, in my opinion, that'll solve it. That'll fix it.
I feel like it would be much better to reward teams than to punish them for having a conference championship. So instead, regardless of playing that conference championship game or let's say preferably not, take both of those teams and put them into the playoff and give them a chance. Now maybe whichever one has more losses gets put against the one seed or whatever the case is, but
the format now
that
I think they're looking at with 8 teams, and that's a moving target. But most recently, what I've heard is that the Power 5, the best team in the Power 5 conferences will go. The championship, they'll still have championship games, and the winner will go. And then they'll take the 3 best at-large teams. So that gives, one loss. More than that. I mean, because not every one of the Power 5 is going to go unbeaten. It just doesn't happen.
Won't you still run into the problem of, let's say, a one-loss Michigan team against an undefeated Boise State?
Because yeah, you will.
Just at large,
again, that's what comes down to the committee and strength of schedule. And like you said, this year Michigan's schedule is not strong. I mean, they played Hawaii, Colorado State, and UConn. UConn's bowl eligible now, and then they played in a Big Ten that's not a strong Big Ten year this year. It really isn't, So, but I think the 8-team playoff will fix it. Now, I wanted to move forward to talk about the Lions just for a minute.
Yeah.
The Detroit Lions. Okay. I watched lots of times. I've told you I'll tape their games because I can't hardly stand to watch them. They're so frustrating to me. I do like their coach, and I really do believe he's trying to change the culture. And like I said, I liked him as a player all the way back at Texas A&M. I liked him as a player. He played for the Lions for a couple of years, and I liked him. He's gritty, tough. did everything you asked him to do that he was physically capable of doing. And that's the kind of players they want on their team. Well, they played the Giants yesterday in New Jersey, and the Giants were 7-2. I don't know how, but they were. And Saquon Barkley, I think, was leading the league in rushing. If he wasn't, he was close. He had 22 yards on 16 carries. The Lions had 2 picks. Kirby Joseph, the rookie from Illinois that was a third-round pick, got one of them. The other one, Aiden Hutchinson, dropped into coverage, and, man, he made a nice pick. I mean, it was like that ball was way over his head, and he jumped up, got it, and then returned it 15 yards or so. Hutchinson also recovered a fumble, and it was just strictly pursuit. They completed a pass. It was on the sidelines. It was away from him. This Will Harris tackled the guy, jarred the ball loose, and Hutch was right there to get it. I think he had a sack, too. This Aleem McNeil, second-year guy, and he's a tackle. He had a sack, and he had at least one tackle for loss. I mean, these are all young guys. They go into New York, and I don't know how the Giants were 7-2. I don't look at them as being a great team this year. But they were 7-2. And the Lions went in there, and I think the final was 31-18. By and large, the Lions dominated that game. Our offense was extremely efficient. Goff only threw for 170 yards, but it was purposeful. He had no turnovers. We ran the ball well. Jamal Williams had 3 touchdowns, rushing touchdowns. So I was just really encouraged, and it was a nice win for the Lions. They're 4-6. Now everybody's saying, well, they're in the hunt. Well, I'm not going there yet. They play the Bills on Thursday, so we'll see.
Yeah.
So,
because they humbled pretty quick.
They do have them at home, but I'm not kidding you. I would be surprised because of that culture change. I would be very surprised if we don't show up Thursday. I'm not saying that we'll beat the Bills, but I would be shocked if we don't show up and give them everything they want.
No, and that's the true
surprised.
Unfortunate, issue with the Lions is that so many people are impatient because we've been losers forever. But with Campbell being the coach and having a guy in the locker room like Hutchinson, which you and I have talked about, his motor, his work ethic, all of that, you've got the ability to instill that behavior into your players. And everybody wants to see that come out. Well, we are seeing that come out. When they're competitive, not saying winning, when they're competitive, you're seeing that culture change. The problem is you can change that culture, but it only matters when you start getting the real players, those special players to buy into that. And the Lions just don't have all those players on their team right now.
No, they don't.
They have to acquire that personnel and still instill it. So this is going to take time. It's not going to be a 1-season turnaround.
No, and Jameson Williams actually started practicing today. He's not going to dress Thursday. They have 3 weeks to activate him. So all I'm saying is that guy's electric. I hope and I'm sure that they will not play him until he is 100% ready, because he did his ACL in the playoffs last year, but that guy's electric, and I'm sure they won't let him play until he's ready. But you're right. You don't turn over a roster in a heartbeat, but you got Malcolm Rodriguez, who I really like. You got Aleem McNeil as a second-year guy. Julian Okwara as a second or third-year guy. He had a good game yesterday. Aleem McNeil had the best game he's had as a Lion. Aiden Hutchinson did what Aiden Hutchinson does. That fumble recovery was all motor. He ran across the field. He wasn't going to make the tackle, but when one of our D-backs did, he pounced on the ball. When he dropped into coverage, you're not going to confuse him with Deion Sanders as a cover guy.
Right.
But he dropped into his zone. And I mean, Jones, the quarterback for the Giants, didn't even see him.
Well, and there's two
And he
things.
jumped up and caught that ball and then took it back about 15 yards. And when you have that kind of effort, I think it's infectious. And I think that, that's the kind of guys they want. And I think they're getting them. But like you said, you don't turn over a roster in a year or 2
Right.
years even.
I
And
think
they're in their
there's
second year of trying to build this thing. They got 2 number 1s and a number 2 this year, I believe. Anyway, the Hawkinson trade and whatever they got back from him was a 2 and a 3, I believe, but we gave up a 3 and a 4, but it's in staggered years. But it was just I was able to watch a Lions game, and even though there were moments of angst, which there always are when I watch the Lions, because you're always waiting for the other shoe to drop. That was impressive as hell, man. They went into Jersey and beat a 7-2 team. And I mean, they beat them. We beat them on offense, we beat them on defense, and we beat them on special teams. And that was really impressive and a really nice win for a team and a coach that needs it. They've won 3 in a row, and that's a good thing. So I was
well, I just
encouraged by
think
that, and I thought it was cool.
with players like Aiden Hutchinson, though, there's two things that you're talking about that I think are really important, and it's not just to show his demeanor, attitude, and work ethic, but it's talking about how structurally sound um, a player like him could make the defense. He runs down plays that he's never going to get to better than any player I've ever seen. I mean, I noticed that right away with him, and it does kind of blow my mind because he doesn't take that jogging half-ass effort, which means those plays where a running back cuts back, they might find a hole in the middle, but on the backside, they're not coming all the way around because he's going to be there. And I really do think that helps. Like you said, it motivates the rest of the team to do it, but I think that helps because you're cutting off the amount of broken plays that can happen. The second thing that to me is even more important for how dynamic your defense can be is the fact that he can drop into coverage in the flats, and because he's got decent hands, he actually is a threat. That no longer becomes a defense that is just a disguise to clog up the passing lanes to stall the QB. That becomes a real defense now because you have confidence in putting him out there and that he can make a play happen. And many teams have that defensive play where the DN drops out as like a flats linebacker, but it's rarely ever successful because any route run on them or any swing pattern, you're getting a running back or a screen, whatever the case is, out in the flats against a bigger guy. But when you've got someone who's tall and got decent hands and a motor, that makes them a threat out there, and that cuts off those short range passes that become chunk plays. And I think that's very important for the Lions.
If when you watch and you watch him play, his I mean, he certainly is a gifted athlete. We talked about that. There's no question about that. But his attitude and his hustle, I mean, it just makes you love him. I want that guy on my team. I'll take a bunch of guys like that with
It's
that
like he
attitude
enjoys
and
the
that
pain.
hustle. I'll take a bunch of guys like that. And I do think it's infectious. One thing that I saw in that game, and I also saw in the Michigan game, and we were talking about this Witherspoon, this corner for Illinois. It's not him. It's not just him, and it's not just anybody yesterday. And it's not limited to college or pro. I mean, I know I'm old school, but I am so tired of all the trash talking. I can't hardly stand it. Now, they always say NFL stands for no fun league. And I remember when they wouldn't let the college guys celebrate, even if they dove over, on a breakaway run, if they dove over like they were breaking the ribbon on a 100-meter dash, they get flagged. Well, they quit doing that, and I'm all about that. I think you ought to let a guy celebrate. But when it's 3rd and 2, and a guy goes for 8 yards, and he gets the first down, and you rack him, I mean, you take him out, and it's a big hit. Why are you standing over talking, bobbing your head, saying all kinds of crap? I just think it needs to stop. I wish they'd stop it. I know that's an old school opinion, but I just wish they'd
I don't think
stop
that's just
that.
an old school opinion. I mean, okay, so the celebration, if you want to be a cheerleader and you want to be goofy or entertaining for the fans or your teammates, that's fine. But you also are role models. Stop acting like a fucking thug. You don't need to talk shit. You don't need to teach the next generation to talk shit. You don't need to be using slurs or bad words constantly, especially when you're on TV. And a lot of times, if it's the NFL, you're mic'd up. And I mean, some of the things they do and some of the things, it's just like when a player gets tackled and you see someone trying to get up from the bottom of the pile and they're twisting his ankle. That's horse
Right.
shit. It's
Right.
it's just dirty play. It's not good sportsmanship, and it's not what the sport is meant to address or recognize or be. And
There was a play yesterday in the Vikings game, and you see it in college too. It's out of control. This trash talking thing, in my view, they need to stop it. They need to start flagging it more, because then people will stop it. If you flag it enough times, the touchdown celebrations, like I said, I have no problem. I have no problem with a guy getting a sack and doing the Superman thing, like tearing his shirt off. You know, I have no problem with that. You just don't have to do that in another guy's right over the guy's face.
you don't
And when
stand over him, look down on him.
yeah, and you know that it's not how's your mom doing that they're saying.
Right.
I saw a play yesterday, and it was Dallas just kicked the hell out of the Vikings, which didn't hurt my feelings at all, even though I'm not a great big Cowboy fan. I'm not a Vikings fan. Dalvin Cook, and I mean, the game was getting to where it was getting out of hand. I mean, Dallas was up already pretty big. I think it ended up 40-3 or something like that. It was bad. But Dalvin Cook, who's a really good back, he had a 16 or 17 yard run, and he got pushed out on the Dallas sideline. I swear one of the Dallas coaches started it. It was an assistant coach, and I don't even know who he was. It wasn't their offensive coordinator. It wasn't their head coach. Their defense, it must have been a position coach. I don't even know who he was. But it, for all the world, looked like he started chirping at Dalvin Cook. And Dalvin Cook chirped back, and he got flagged. Well, let's stop all of it. I've always said, if spitting on the sidewalk, if you make it a $500 fine or make the penalty extreme, there'll be a lot less spitting on the sidewalk. And I don't care about the celebrations. I really don't. I
It's
think that's
about
fine.
representing character. I mean, when you are the National Football League, you're one of the most watched programs in the country. It's like, show a little pride. And college football should be the same way. You guys have a license to print money with your networks, but you don't have enough pride to make sure that your games are clean like that. I'm not talking about bad penalty calls here and there, ref mistakes, or
human error is part of the game.
Yes, but
Yeah.
when you get to a point where it's just people talking shit and you're breeding that because the young generation watching this on TV, that's what they're going to do when they come to it. It's just having no pride. And my biggest issue is the coaching of that. So for me, and this is kind of how I look at a lot of topics, is I try and put myself in a situation where we're more relatable. And I sit there and I go, okay, if I am the head coach and I see my player do that, not only are you not representing our brand well, how come you got so much gas you can run your mouth? Maybe you should focus that on giving me more effort on the plays, because you should be out of breath from trying your hardest and not talking shit.
Again, to me, and I will like this Witherspoon kid. I mean, I'm objective about it, or I try to be. I mean, he is a really, really good college corner, and I think he's going to be a really good pro corner. It's like, why do you need to do that? And he is a renowned trash talker, a guy in the pros who's a renowned trash talker, and there are many. Jalen Ramsey. Jalen Ramsey's a great player. He doesn't need to do that. Why?
Deion
What?
Sanders will always be that to me. And I know he's one of the greatest of
Oh,
all
big
time.
time.
Some people think the greatest. I personally don't. I don't think he could tackle me, but but that's
Well, he was
kind of
never a
beside
good
the
tackler,
point.
but he was a
Right.
good cover guy.
And that's why I think someone like Woodson is more rounded. They're a better corner than him. He might be the best cover corner, but
Right.
I just
Woodson was
again
a
with
finisher,
all of
for sure.
those traits to talk shit and all that, like for okay, the comparison to me would be LeBron. LeBron wants to call himself the GOAT. The first time you do that is the last time you're ever in the conversation, because the GOAT doesn't have to call themselves the GOAT.
That's a fair statement.
With Deion Sanders talking shit, to me, it's like, dude, everybody on this planet knows you're a hell of a player. All you're doing is defaming yourself. You're hurting your own image running your mouth when your athletic prowess is so great. If you kept your mouth shut, you'd be one of the most favorite people on the planet.
My point is very simple, and it's, you want to celebrate? Celebrate. You want to celebrate a sack? You want to celebrate a big hit? I don't care. You want to celebrate a touchdown? God bless you. But you don't have to get in somebody's face to do that. When you're sitting there talking shit, standing over somebody, that's, to me, that's over the line, and I just think it's too much. And I really think that people will get fed up as I am, maybe someday. And I they have to do something about it, because, like you said, if we're not seeing it in Pop Warner leagues, we're going to see it soon, because that's what the kids watch. They're watching those guys. High school's watching college. College is watching pro, and it's just, it spreads, and I just don't. I'm not a fan.
They're taking away creativity though and replacing it with thuggery, and it frustrates me, because even when T.O. had the Sharpie, or when Chad Johnson did the popcorn, or I think T.O. did the pom-poms and stuff, and things were starting to get a little bit out of control, those things were very creative. But when you're just like demoralizing someone with your words, and you're sitting there and being degrading to another human being, you're taking away the creativity and you're embracing thuggery. And I just don't understand how we can sit there and think that's acceptable to teach or show our role models doing such.
I just don't understand how we can let it go. I just don't see how we can just let it keep, because it's not going to get better if we don't do something about it. It's going to get worse.
Right.
When Barry Sanders played, one of the things I admired about him was that he scored a touchdown, and all he did was hand the ball to the official. Now, again, I don't care if people celebrate. I don't care if their celebrations are choreographed. I just appreciate that fact about him. Now, you're old enough to remember, when your brother was in high school, through 4 years of high school, probably more in the first couple than more in the last couple, he scored a lot of touchdowns. And he always had this little, like, skip shuffle. Like, he was kind of trying to stop running, but he couldn't stop running. But he would do that skip shuffle and hand the ball to the official. Because I remember Barry Sanders talking about, people ask him about that, and I know I told all you kids this as you were playing. Act like you've been there before, and you'll be back again. And Jacob, I remember him specifically because he had the shuffle move. It was just like a sliding sideways kind of a move, but it was always toward the official, and it was always to hand them the ball. Now in high school, you get flagged for anything still yet, any kind of celebration,
Yeah.
and that's fine. But I don't mind the celebrations in college or pros. I think that's a classy move. It was funny when we were watching his Jacob's kids, Juliana and Jackson, last week. I put on some music of some kind, and Jackson was actually doing that shuffle, and I told Jacob about it. I said he was doing the shuffle. I think I sent him the video and showed him, but but again, now in high school you can't do it anyway because you get flagged. And I don't care about the touchdown celebrations, but the trash talking, I've had it, man.
Well, and there's a hidden part of that maybe we missed, and I think you probably agree with me on this, but you know, as much as we give officials shit with their human errors and all that, they have an incredibly hard job. But if you, as a player, as an athlete, as a team, treat them with respect, they will do the same to you.
I believe
And so
that.
when you're running your mouth all game and he's having to separate you and you're talking shit all game, guess what? That pass interference that was a maybe because you were both hand fighting, now it's pass interference because you won't shut your goddamn mouth. And
Well,
I really do. When we talk about the human error, I think it is impossible. Anyone can say that they want to separate it the best they can, but it is impossible to separate someone who has been a nuisance for 3 hours to separate them from your play call judgment. And when something's borderline, they are no longer going to get the benefit of the doubt, and you're changing the game because you're running your mouth. And all you got to
I
do is give them the same respect.
I wouldn't fight you at all on that. I wouldn't fight you at all on that. I just, again, it's an old guy's opinion, but I hope that they
It's a
do
correct
something
one.
about it because I really do think it's going to get worse before it gets better if they don't. But
Well, that I think
we had
covers us
talked
in
about
football.
doing some
Yeah.
Allen stories, and I wanted to share this one. This one isn't like a rip roaring Allen story. My friend Alan, for anybody who's followed the podcast, we've talked about him a lot. Um, and this one isn't a rip roaring Alan story, but it's just a funny, cute Alan story, I think. When we did the motorcycle trip to the Black Hills 2 years ago, 2 summers ago, I had those T-shirts made for us. On the front, they said "The Last Hurrah 2021." On the back, it said "5 fake hips and a pacemaker tour," because I've got a pacemaker and 2 fake hips. Your brother's got 2 fake hips, and Alan's got one, and he's working on getting the other one done.
Yeah.
So we wore those shirts one day as we were riding, and that happened to be the day we went into Deadwood. And Deadwood's a pretty cool place. I mean, it's mostly casinos. I mean, it's where Wild Bill Hickok was killed. You know, he's buried on Mount Moriah there, and Calamity Jane is buried right next to him. It's a historic place, but now it's like all casinos and touristy, and it's fine. It's a clean little tourist town. Very nice. Well, as it's the three of us, and I think I've shared pictures. I don't know if they've been on the podcast of us wearing those T-shirts, but we're not little, and there's three of us, and people were like, everybody wanted to talk to us about those shirts, and they were wanting to get their picture, us to take our picture with them, and things like that. Well, this is still, we're on the backside of well, we weren't even on the backside. I mean, it was COVID was still going on. Some places were open, but even in Deadwood, that's full of restaurants. A lot of those restaurants weren't open. So as we're walking around downtown and we're seeing all these historic places, the saloon where Bill Hickok was shot and all that, and it's a hot summer day and there's lots of foot traffic. We're looking for a place to eat, and we're really having trouble because all these restaurants are closed because of COVID. Now, we ended up finding one that was actually inside a casino because the place is loaded with casinos. But as we're walking down the sidewalk and people would stop us or, I turn around and Alan is talking to this. I hesitate to say elderly because I'm elderly. They were at least my age. They were retired, a man and a woman. And I mean, he's having this conversation with them. And, and I walk up and I don't remember what Jacob was doing. He was buying a t shirt or something. And I walk up and I'm listening in on this conversation. And, and I hear that these people are from Maryland. They both seem really nice. They're retired. He's, asking them, well, what'd you retire from? All these pleasantries. And he says, well, are you guys, just traveling through? Oh, we've got our motor home, 8 miles out of town. It's at this beautiful park. And he goes, oh, really? Yeah. Yeah. He says, a nice place. Oh, yeah. Well, how big's your motor home? And, and he's asking him all these questions. And this lady, you can tell, is just tickled to death that he's talking. And the guy's enjoying it too. And he's like, well, he goes, we can't find a restaurant around here open. And she goes, well, we don't worry about that. She goes, we just go back to our motorhome and I'll cook dinner there. He's like, well, what are you having? And she
Naturally.
tells me, whatever. So now it goes down the path of he's trying to invite himself to dinner. And I, again, while I'm just kind of sitting back listening to all this, I said, well, and then by that time, Jacob comes walking up. And it's like, I said, well, I know it might look like we eat a lot, but we really don't eat that much. So anyway, she says, like, we're having pork chops tonight or something. He goes, Alan's like, that sounds really good. You mind if we stop by?
Oh my God.
So again, I mean, it's not a rip-roaring Alan story, but it's a cute Alan story, and that's just kind of how he is. That's, he's a icebreaker, I guess, is what you'd
For
say.
sure.
But we end up talking to those people for 15 or 20 minutes and had a few laughs, and I'm sure made their day. He did anyway. But yeah, he's he's a character, that's for sure. He's a lot like Shaq. He's playful.
He's definitely a playful critter, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I don't know about you, but I think that's good to wrap up. I know we had talked about potentially talking about a movie, but I think we're at about time, so we can save Meet Joe Black for next week if you're good with that.
I am.
Is there anything else that you wanted to cover?
No, I do want to. Let's save Meet Joe Black for next week, and I promise I'll either have a rip-roaring Alan story or a funny Jeff story, a cousin Jeff
Well,
story.
the good lighthearted ones are always good too. It's good to hear that you guys, have fun, and that's nice that he made sure that they enjoyed the conversation. I mean, I think that's pretty cool.
Oh, yeah. It's again, he is the icebreaker. When you go somewhere, he'll break the ice for sure, and he's a likable character. But yeah, I'm good if you are, buddy.
Sounds good. Well, to all of our listeners out there, we appreciate you guys, especially if you made it this far. Please feel free to share this with a friend. We're obviously looking to grow. We'd love to hear any comments or questions that you may have, whether it's topics, the length of this podcast, anything. Please feel free to comment below. And as always, be safe, be smart, make good choices. Peace out. Love you, Dad.
Love you too, buddy. Take care.
Bye.
sound does a zebra make? That's a giraffe. What sound does a giraffe make? Okay, where's the gorilla? What does a gorilla do? No, gorilla goes like this. Not, he doesn't beat on my chest. He beats on your chest.